woods yet. The team and I agree that all our evaluations, and most importantly, his clinical status, support the president's safe return home.
President Trump is heading back home to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to finish his recovery from COVID-19. But how will he fare in the next few days, and what impact will it have on the election? We'll break it down.
And meanwhile, the voter registration deadline is Friday for New York State. Find out how Syracuse students are working to get people signed up.
And months have passed without a deal on a second stimulus. Are we any closer after a meeting on Capitol Hill? The answers tonight on Talking Points.
The president is expected to discharge from Walter Reed Medical Center within the next half hour. Good evening, I'm Brandon Ross.
And I'm Manny Martinez. Welcome to Talking Points.
Trump's condition appears to be stable, but confusion has swirled since his positive test last Thursday. Until Saturday, Americans were told the president only had mild symptoms. This even after he checked into Walter Reed on Friday afternoon. Eventually, it was revealed that the president received 2 doses of supplemental oxygen. He's also been on remdesivir, a heavy anti-inflammatory called dexamethasone, and an experimental antibody treatment from Regeneron. Talking Points analyst Michael Fernari joins us with the latest on the president's condition. So, Mike, we know that the president is set to be discharged within the next 30 minutes from Walter Reed, but what is the latest on his condition?
Well, Brandon, right now the outlook appears to be quite an optimistic one. So we heard from Chief Doctor in this situation, Sean Conley, today. He gave an answer that's very simple, but it's been receiving a lot of attention online. He said very simply, you've seen the tweets, you've seen the videos, he's back. And of course, there may be some credence to that. So he hasn't received oxygen treatment since Saturday, and the one he received Saturday was quite a mild one. He hasn't had a fever in about 72 hours. And so it looks like he may be out of the woods, at least temporarily, at least for now. So there was that stretch late Friday, early Saturday, where I think people were really very concerned about what was going on and potentially that the president's condition was extremely serious. It appears that we may be out of that for now, pending further details.
So, Michael, backing up just a little bit, can you give us a timeline, or the timeline on how and when we believe the president contracted the virus?
Well, Manny, it appears that this kind of initially stemmed from a campaign event on Thursday. So in Minnesota, there was a campaign event, and on the way back from that event, Hope Hicks, who works in communications for the White House, was experiencing symptoms on the plane ride, and she began to isolate herself on the plane, but President Trump was subject to a rapid test on the plane ride back, and that's when he first tested positive. He told people about this at 1 a.m. on Twitter, so it was early Friday morning. Now, what people are speculating about is that, maybe this outbreak started at the Barrett hearing last weekend. So, COVID has really been going around Capitol Hill, particularly with Republican lawmakers, and a lot of the cases have been traced back to that hearing on Saturday, that event in the Rose Garden. So some people have speculated that, but we're not exactly sure where it started. We know for the president, it started in Minnesota with Hope Hicks.
So, Mike, obviously there was all this confusion over the weekend, and one person who really didn't help with that confusion was Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. What exactly did he do to fan the flames there?
Well, Brandon, as we mentioned, late Friday, early Saturday, there was a ton of confusion about what exactly was going on with President Trump. And Mark Meadows spoke to reporters on Saturday, and what he said then was seen as very concerning. He said that the next 48 hours are going to be critical for the president's condition, and that, we don't know what his vitals are going to be over the next 48 hours. Now, President Trump tried to contradict that statement because he ended up publishing a video that night. And it's sort of been swept under the rug recently. We haven't really seen much of a punishment for Meadows because, as we know, the Trump administration does not take particularly kindly to leaks of information. So that's something to keep an eye on going forward, is whether Meadows receives any kind of punishment or whether this kind of jeopardizes his job.
And how about what may come next as far as the president's treatment? What do we know?
So what we know is that he's been prescribed remdesivir in the near future, as Brandon mentioned. So that was the first drug he received, and he's going to be receiving another dose for that during his discharge. So he's heading to the White House tonight. What we don't know exactly is what the conditions are going to be in the White House. So we know that he's going to be able to construct some facsimile of the same treatment he was receiving in the White House. What we have not heard yet is what exactly the status is with regards to isolation. Sean Conley did not feel at liberty to share that with the public. So We know he's going to be receiving some drugs. He's returning to the White House. His condition appears stable for now, but exactly what the conditions are, exactly when he'll be back out on the road, we don't really know as of now. Thanks, guys.
Michael, thank you. And while the President Trump, his health status remains uncertain, his COVID-19 diagnosis has forced him to put his campaign on the sidelines with less than 30 days until the general election. More than 1 million ballots have already been cast, and Joe Biden has continued his campaign across the Midwest and the South. Here to break down the electoral impacts of Trump's diagnosis is Talking Points analyst Anthony DeBundo. Anthony, what are the voters saying in the early polls taken since the debate and Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis last week?
Manny, it's almost a little bit difficult to say right now. There's been so much news that has been happening between both the COVID diagnosis and the debate happening both within 3 days of each other. But the initial post-reaction debate polls show that Biden, if he didn't gain, he certainly didn't lose. So the post poll from CNN had Biden winning 48-41. A recent NBC News poll, which showed Trump to be down 14, showed that he was down 14 nationally, which is a big concern for him. It's not clear, though, the impact of the COVID diagnosis itself.
So how has Joe Biden responded to Trump's diagnosis within the campaign? We know that he pulled negative ads last Friday.
Yeah, so Joe Biden's campaign has pulled all of its negative ads, but he has not stopped from doing actual campaigning. Biden was in Grand Rapids, Michigan on Saturday night when he learned that the president was headed to the hospital. Obviously, he wished him well. Sunday, he called an early lid. He was not out on the campaign trail on Sunday, but today he was in South Florida as he's preparing for an NBC town hall with Lester Holt tonight. So he's continuing his campaigning. He sees this as an opportunity almost to get out there more than he has been in the past while the president is not out visiting multiple key swing states.
So obviously this is what Joe Biden is doing, but President Trump has his own campaign to run too down the final stretch, and now he is sidelined. How has the campaign continued on without him, and who have been his main surrogates out on the trail?
Of course, the next big major event in the whole voting process here is the vice presidential debate, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah tomorrow night. Mike Pence has been throughout the Midwest and the West. He was in Arizona over the weekend. He was in Utah today doing some campaign events. He is now sort of the main surrogate for the Trump presidency while President Trump is recovering from COVID. And of course, the debate tomorrow night is a major inflection point, some people say. There's not a ton of history on how much the VP debate actually matters in terms of changing people's voting opinions, when we already know that 74% of voters didn't have their minds changed by the presidential debate. But we definitely know tomorrow night's VP debate, in light of all of the new COVID restrictions, they just announced there's going to be plexiglass between the candidates. They want to extend the distance between the candidates. There's COVID concerns, but the debate will go on as of now, and it's a big moment for the Trump campaign to explain themselves after what has been a tumultuous weekend.
Anthony, thank you. There's certainly a lot to look out for there. New York State voter registration ends this Friday, and community organizations throughout Onondaga County are volunteering to help with registering people to vote. Talking Points analyst Mariah Humiston explains how Syracuse students are doing their part to help with the final few days of voter registration.
Syracuse students are knocking on doors, making phone calls, and walking around campus to ask the same question.
Hey, have you registered to vote here?
New York State voter registration ends this Friday, and student fellows with the Dana Balter campaign are making sure that students and community members get registered.
It's a really close race. It's a really important election. So we're just trying to get as many students registered in this district as possible.
Onondaga County is one of many voting in the 24th congressional district race between John Katko and Dana Balter. The final decision of this race, as well as the presidential election, could come down to final absentee ballots. Organizations nationwide are helping with registration as well as requesting and sending in absentee ballots for this election. Syracuse University's Hillel is taking part in Mitzvote, a national campaign providing students the resources they need for the 2020 election.
So the point of the social media campaign was first to get people information about how do I actually register to vote? How do I actually get my absentee ballot in the mail? And then the second part about it was talking about, civic engagement and why it's important to vote, and especially as college students on a college campus, we're learning about how to be civically engaged. And right now we're seeing a huge point of turmoil and contention in the country, and the best way to make a change so that you are represented by the people who you think represent you is to actually send in your vote. I think a lot of college students don't know that, and if we can show them how they can be best represented by people who they want to be represented by, then that makes in turn a better change for all of us.
Now, while there are only a few days left to register to vote in New York State, the record for the total enrollment of registered voters in Onondaga County has been broken this year. The record was previously held in 2004. And looking ahead, this is going to be very important as we see youth voters and how they take on not only the presidential election, but the 24th congressional seat between John Katko and Dana Balter. Now, for the rest of New York State, if you are not voting in person, registered absentee ballots are due online by October 27th.
Thank you, Mariah. And after the break, New York coronavirus numbers are spiking again. What's being done to curb the spread? Next.
Leaving hot coals improperly extinguished can cause a wildfire.
Hey guys, it's Smokey!
It looks as if Smokey is going to use the drown, stir, drown and feel technique. After the first drown, a good start. Next, another drink. And finally, a close feel.
Is it cool? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Smokey, catch! Oh, my bad, Smokey.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb. But if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving. The ultimate party foul.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver. The one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
New York State started as the epicenter of the COVID outbreak in the United States, but eventually the state controlled the spread and significantly decreased infection rates below 1%. Now there are concerns. Infection rates are increasing again in certain parts of the state, and Talking Points analyst Natalie Fahmy is here with the details. So, Natalie, this has been happening not necessarily as much here, but where exactly in New York State have these cases been spiking up?
Right now, there are 20 zip codes with an increase in COVID-19 positivity rates, but as far as hotspots go, most of them are downstate in Brooklyn and Queens.
So how much of an increase is there? What is that number?
So since September 26th, the statewide infection rate has been at least 1%. Today, Cuomo updated the numbers, and 1.22% of tests reported yesterday were positive. But compare this to the 20 infected zip codes, they have an average positivity rate of 5.2%. The highest is in Orange County with a 7-day positivity average of 18.4%, but on Saturday, the daily positivity rate did drop to 13.7%.
So this is a big spike. So what does this uptick mean for schools and businesses in that community?
So right now, Mayor de Blasio says the increase in positive cases calls for schools and non-essential businesses to close in 9 areas where infection rates are highest. The 9 zip codes have a 7-day average of at least 3% or higher in COVID positivity rates. This would be the first major reversal in New York State, but this decision is pending Governor Cuomo's approval.
And it'll be interesting to see how this all fleshes out. Natalie Fahmy, thank you so much.
Stimulus talks remain ongoing in Washington. House Democrats, led by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, voted for a $2.2 trillion package that they now hope can be negotiable with the White House and GOP-held senators. Both sides are hoping that an agreement can be reached. Talking Points analyst Oscar Offerman is in studio to discuss how there could be a deal soon. So, Oscar, why have stimulus talks suddenly gained so much momentum after many months of stagnation, to be honest?
Well, the fact of the matter is that both sides have more of an impetus to reach a deal now. Now, obviously, Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin spoke on the phone today. They said they will speak on the phone again tomorrow. They haven't reached a deal yet. For Democrats, they've been working on a deal for a while now, and they just passed a $2.4 trillion deal, as you mentioned earlier, last week. For Republicans, they see two things. They see a stagnant economy after a few months of recovery from COVID, and they also see President Trump's sort of lagging poll numbers. NBC News Wall Street Journal poll released recently had the president down as much as 14 points. So there really remains an impetus to get a deal done for Republicans before the election, and they hope that that will help the president in his re-election bid.
Interesting to see how this fleshes out, Oscar. Thank you so much. And moving on to the European Union, their Executive Commission has just released its first report on adherence to the rule of law. The Democracy Report was published just days before leaders in the EU began meeting for budgetary discussions. Live from Los Angeles to break down this report and how it could affect EU relations is Talking Points analyst Spencer Queskin. So this report in particular went really hard on Poland and Hungary. How have they reacted to these allegations?
Thanks, guys. So, the European Union has just released a report criticizing several countries on their democratic standards and their rule of law. The report mentions Bulgaria, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain. Now, all of these countries, except for Malta and Spain, were once part of the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc. The European Union believes that, within all of these countries, the judicial system is under threat in some capacity. The report specifically expressed concern for Poland and Hungary. The EU believes that Poland is deficient in its national justice system, its anti-corruption frameworks, and its media freedom. For Hungary, the report expresses concern over higher levels of corruption, lower media freedom, and lower minority rights.
Spencer, sorry I jumped the gun there on you, but so now that we have all of this, what is the EU planning to do next?
So the European Union really has two options here. The more extreme is invoking Article 7.
When it comes to breaches to the rule of law, the European Commission has a clear role to play as guardian of the treaty. And this is why we will also, in the future, not shy away from launching infringements and continuing the discussion under Article 7.
This would suspend the voting rights of offending members, but it requires unanimous consent. The other option is sanctions, and with the EU discussing a €2.1 trillion spending package, this option seems more likely. Spencer Queskin, reporting from Los Angeles, back to you guys.
Coming up on Talking Points, a Monday night roundup of other big stories from this past week. That's next.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait, why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did Cavs go on vacation? New York.
Whew, what a week. And Manny, in an era where the news cycle is nonstop, I don't think it's ever churned this fast in recent memory.
No, but we want to make sure you're informed on everything that's happened since our last show last Monday, and that begins with last Tuesday's debate.
If you call it a debate, the president and former VP Joe Biden got more attention for trading barbs than actual thoughts on policy. At various points, President Trump went out of his way to attack Biden's son Hunter for his cocaine addiction and business dealings in Eastern Europe. Allegations of wrongdoing have been regularly debunked, but most controversially, he deliberately flouted the agreed-upon rules. He continuously interrupted Biden during his answers, and it even got to the point where the Commission on Presidential Debates is planning to make changes ahead of the next one.
But Biden didn't have clean hands either. Throughout the debate, he called the president a clown and at one point pleaded him to shut up.
Yeah, those were really harsh words, and I know watching that debate, and I was actually talking with a family friend, and they had a kid. It was his first time watching the debate, and they had to explain to him that this is not how it usually goes.
And that there are some words that perhaps you shouldn't use.
Yeah, no kidding. It'll be interesting to see what changes are made in future debates, if there are future debates given President Trump's conditions, so it'll be interesting to see how that all fleshes out. And recent polling suggests that the road to re-election is getting even tougher for President Trump. As mentioned before, an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll has challenger Joe Biden by 14 points nationwide. In key states of Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Ohio, the numbers continue to favor Biden.
A New York Times Siena poll has the former vice president up 7 in Pennsylvania, ahead by 5 in Florida, and in front by 8 in Arizona. CBS News and YouGov released a poll yesterday showing the president and Joe Biden in a statistical tie in Ohio. And of course, Brandon, as Ohio has voted for the winner of the election every time since 1964, who knows what will happen this year, though.
But what's interesting with these results versus the polls that came out in 2016 that were rightly criticized quite frequently by people in the aftermath, one thing that Nate Silver, who's one of the biggest political pollsters out there, he came to recognize, and he said this going into the debate too, even though Trump was trailing in most of those polls, they were within the margin of error. All these polls for Joe Biden right now in these Rust Belt states and these competitive states, these leads are outside the margin of error, which typically cap out at 3, 4, 5 percentage points. So this will be interesting to see how it fleshes out. The race for the White House is entering the home stretch, but the same goes for Senate and House races too. One of the most competitive has seen quite a wild week for both candidates.
A right-wing blog exposed a series of flirtatious texts between Democratic nominee Cal Cunningham and a campaign strategist. Both of them are married. He's admitted to wrongdoing, but is not dropping out of the race.
And in most situations, this would be a boost for the incumbent there in North Carolina in the Senate, Tom Tillis. He's trailing Cunningham by 6.5 points in the Real Clear Politics average, but he was one of 3 senators at Amy Coney Barrett's Rose Garden introduction to contract COVID-19, and that actually could end up playing a big role in her confirmation. He and a couple of the, and one of the other senators, Mike Lee, on that committee, are now absent until they can hold that vote, and that would make it a 10-10 tie in the committee, so they're actually pushing that back in the process, so that could slow things down.
This event, which is being called by some as a super spreader event, has been unreal in terms of the scope and the magnitude of what has been going on in Trump and the presidency and coronavirus and everything in this whole past week. Incredible.
And even on top of that, we haven't mentioned yet, but Chris Christie also in the hospital, and Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, also testing positive, and he said, and I quote, he will literally walk into the Senate in a moon suit to vote to confirm Barrett if that's what it takes to get it through. So they certainly are not planning, the Republicans, to slow down in that confirmation process.
Absolutely not. And up next, the battle for the Supreme Court is just beginning. How the upcoming election will impact the makeup of the bench.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
In the wake of Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination, prominent Democrats have raised the possibility of court packing. That's when the number of justices is increased to alter the court's ideological makeup. Such a move would be unprecedented in the modern era.
Here to give us a look at what this could mean for the future of the Supreme Court are Talking Point analysts Michael Finari and Anthony DeBundo. So, Michael, can you give us a brief history of what court packing means?
Sure, Manny. So this issue stretches back to about 1869. Now, there's no constitutional requirement for how many Supreme Court justices there have to be. It's not specified. That's something that's going to be set by Congress and the President. But the norm of 9 justices has been true for over 150 years now. The first time that was tested was in 1937 when we saw the Judicial Procedures Reform Bill under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, FDR's big legislation of the time, the New Deal, was getting thwarted by the Supreme Court. So after his 1936 re-election, he decided that he was going to try to circumvent the issue by packing the court. That bill failed in Congress, and historians say that it ended up dividing FDR's re-election coalition in 1936. So that's something that, in an election year, which we are now in, could be an instructive example.
So given this situation, how are Democrats treating the issue, and what can we expect going forward, considering how radical this proposal seems to be?
Well, Brandon, there's really no response at the moment. There's not been a unified front on this issue. So a lot of people, there's a few people who have been supportive of it, particularly Ed Markey, Joe Kennedy, a few senators. Other than that, it's really been uncertain.
Yeah, it's kind of a divisive issue for the Democrats. We've seen Joe Biden, who has not answered the question in 2 separate formats, one with the press and one in the debate on Tuesday night. He didn't answer it. Kamala Harris, known as a very liberal senator, has not addressed the issue either. So the Biden and Harris campaign has kind of been a little bit quiet on the issue. But when you look down to the more moderate senators, Joe Manchin has ruled the idea out. He's probably the most moderate in the next Senate for the Democrats. It really comes down to how big is their majority. If the Democrats only have 50 or 51 seats, which is the most likely scenario should they win the Senate at all, they're probably not going to have enough votes unless they can get the Kyrsten Sinemas, who has not said much. So unless they can really whip people and whip senators to get onto it, they probably won't have the votes.
So guys, what's the strategy here? How would Democrats go about getting this done?
It's really an open question. Now, I think firstly, as Anthony mentioned, it's going to totally depend on how big that majority is. I'm very interested to see how people end up answering this, but it's going to take some action in the Senate, and it's going to take a united front. That's the thing that we know for sure.
And it really makes it a defining issue of a potential Biden presidency. Obviously, Obamacare in 2008 was for the Democrats then. They got killed in 2010 for that. What happens with the Biden administration if they were to pack the Supreme Court? It remains to be seen.
Interesting to see how this will all flesh out. Michael and Anthony, thank you. And that's all the time we have for Talking Points tonight. For more content, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News, and like us on Facebook.
Check out our website at CitrusTV.com for more content. For Citrus TV, I'm Manny Martinez.
And I'm Brandon Ross. Have a great night, Syracuse, and stay